For centuries, the architects of global empires presented their expansion as a steady march of progress. From the perspective of imperial capitals, colonialism was a story of development, bringing trade and modern civilization to the distant corners of the earth. Looking at this map of territories claimed by European powers, you can see their sheer ambition. They pointed to expanding coastlines with deep-water ports and continents crossed by miles of new railway tracks. Distant regions were suddenly woven together through massive commercial shipping. But beneath the speeches and celebrations in London or Paris existed a second, much harsher reality, one shaped by extraction, control, and millions of lives dictated by decisions made oceans away. By the 15th century, European kingdoms were locked in fierce, escalating competition. To survive and project their own power, their rulers desperately needed to find new sources of untapped wealth. They funded commercial voyages into unfamiliar waters, searching specifically for lucrative resources like spices, precious metals, and rare textiles that could enrich their treasuries. What began as commercial ambition quickly mutated. Merchants set up isolated trading posts to secure these goods. To protect those investments, trading posts were reinforced into heavily armed military outposts. Eventually, those military outposts projected power inland, establishing complete territorial control over large parts of Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Empire was rarely an act of charity. It was a calculated financial investment, and the expected return was an endless stream of profit. At its core, the colonial system operated as a massive, highly engineered machine. Its primary function was to siphon valuable resources outward from the occupied territories and funnel the resulting profits directly inward to the empire. You can see this dynamic clearly in agricultural management. Land that local communities relied upon for food was forcibly reorganized. Entire regions were ordered to produce lucrative export crops, harvested by local labor under the strict watch of foreign overseers. Even the celebrated infrastructure served this singular purpose. Railways were carved through dense tropical environments at massive physical cost, not to develop the local economy, but to accelerate the movement of raw materials from the interior straight to the shipping ports. To maintain this deeply unequal economic system, empires relied on absolute obedience. When communities inevitably resisted, uprisings were met with the constant threat and frequent deployment of regimented armed colonial forces. Beyond direct violence, administrators developed more insidious methods of control. They deliberately exploited pre-existing local divisions and concentrated political authority into the hands of a select few who proved willing to cooperate. Whether enforced by violence or secured through political bribery, colonial stability was designed simply to keep the economic engine running without interruption. But behind the ledgers and export quotas lies a far more profound disruption. For the people living under foreign rule, colonialism was their daily, inescapable reality. Entire generations watched as their traditional social structures fractured. Families faced forced displacement, local industries collapsed under imported goods, and workers were driven into increasingly coercive labor systems while struggling to preserve their own cultural identities. This vulnerability became catastrophic when natural disasters intersected with weaponized administrative policy. While droughts have historically affected societies worldwide, the colonial response often exacerbated severe shortages into full-scale famines. Because economic priorities dictated that agricultural yields continue flowing through commercial networks, food was literally exported out of starving regions, and local granaries were emptied to satisfy imperial contracts. Millions endured immense physical devastation. Long after these crises ended, uncomfortable debates over responsibility, negligence, and the true cost of imperial wealth remain entirely unresolved. The glittering progress of imperial capitals was ultimately purchased with millions of human lives, treated by distant administrators as acceptable losses on a balance sheet. No system built entirely on domination can sustain itself indefinitely. People rarely accept being controlled forever, and resistance was always inevitable. The turning point arrived in the 20th century. Two massive world wars inflicted heavy structural damage on European cities and severely drained their treasuries, shattering any remaining illusion of their invincibility. Sensing this weakness, powerful resistance movements gained immediate traction. Intellectuals dismantled imperial narratives, while charismatic leaders mobilized immense crowds to demand direct control over their own political futures. A massive chain reaction followed. One territory after another forced the issue of independence, replacing foreign administrators with local governments and rapidly redrawing the global map. A sprawling global order that had taken centuries to build, and which once seemed utterly permanent, unraveled completely in just a few short decades. Official colonial rule largely disappeared, but history rarely ends the moment a foreign flag comes down. The profound structural impact of the empires stayed behind. Today, geopolitical inequality is still shaped by centuries of extracted wealth, and modern nation-states continue to be defined by the arbitrary territorial lines originally drawn by European conquerors. This is the inseparable dual legacy of colonialism. We are left with a highly connected global infrastructure, built directly upon a foundation of profound violence, coercion, and exploitation. To understand the power dynamics of the modern world, we have to look past the myths of progress and confront this uncomfortable history exactly as it happened. As the age of empire started to fracture, one of the most remarkable challenges to its authority emerged from a territory that refused to be silenced. It was a movement that fought an exhausted empire not primarily with military strength, but through sheer determination, mass peaceful mobilization, and a completely different vision of what power could look like. Next time, we explore how that vision took shape and how India finally won its freedom.